Hey everyone, welcome back to How to Build a Graflex. And in this part we're going to be, basically we're going to be setting up our battery for the chassis and our speaker, and then we're going to be fitting our LED inside. The reason I'm starting off with the battery is because it's going to go in first, then our speaker is going to go in place over here like I've showed in previous videos. Over here inside this little section is where the speaker is going to go, and we're going to start off with the battery. I have my brown Teflon tape because, like I said in an earlier video, this is going to act as a safety for my rubber that I painted over and that I used to bar the hole, the left hole, which is for the clamp switch wires for A New Hope. Since we're not going to be going with that, I really don't care if I barred it with rubber. So we have this battery from JQ Sabers, and they have a JST connector, and I already marked it because that's where I'm going to be cutting. I want my wire to be, we're going to stagger our wires as well because we want them, we do not want the battery and the heat shrink and the wires to be together too close to add to the total diameter of the chassis. So if you take your battery and you insert it all the way and make sure that the wires are up, that they're actually, you know, up against the window, and you use your finger and you just press it really nicely because that's where the speaker and the rest of the wires are going to be bunched up in. So you press with your finger like this and you decipher where you want your battery wires to be cut. So I want them to be, there are these like teeth groove sections, so I want it to be around the middle, around here, and that is where I marked it with my marker pen. So I'm going to be taking this off. Since we're going to be using our battery, we're going to be playing with electricity, and these are PCB board protected, which means you do not want to do anything that will trip them. And one of the things that will trip them is a short, and one of the easiest ways to get a short and screw up the battery is by cutting off both wires at the same time. This is live, this must have some power to it, and even if it's not completely empty, you never want to risk doing some electrical work with both wires at the same time. The reason is this wire snipper or any kind of snipper usually are metal, and if you cut the wires at the same time, you complete the circuit between the wires and the battery, and you will set the PCB board to go off and you will screw up the battery. You do not want to do that. That is why we have electrical tape that we will be putting onto our battery connections one by one. So what we're going to be doing, I decided what I'm going to be cutting off. So I'm going to start off with my black wire, nice and slow, and I'm going to cut it right about here. And I'm going to be applying some electrical tape to my battery because I don't want to risk anything regarding safety. If you have safety, you have quality, and you do not want to risk your safety and whatnot. So that really did nothing. I should get a pair of scissors actually, or this could also work. Yes, it did. Quick thinking. Electrical tape is very sticky, but it's sticky for a reason. And like that, you secure your connection. And that's that. And the same principle will go for the red wire. Now, like I said earlier, I want to stagger my wires, which means that the heat shrink connections are going to have to be, well, different, which means that if this one's longer, then I want to cut my red wire about here and heat shrink my connection here and do my heat shrink for my black wire around here. So if you just really look at it closely and you paint a picture in your mind, let's say this is going to be where the heat shrink is going to be. For the black wire, I want the heat shrink for the red wire to start over here. So my red wire is going to be a little shorter. And I'm sitting and calculating a bit to make sure that I don't screw it up, it's not too short. There, so I'm going to cut my red wire about over here. So I'm cutting, cut it just a little shorter, just short enough. Okay, so these are kind of short. The reason why we're doing this little modification is because these wires are so thick that if you had to run the entire chassis with these wires, as opposed to the 30 gauge wires, which you can see the differences are immense. The one looks like a hair and the other one, well, looks more like a wire than the 30 gauge wire I have. So it would be near impossible to fit the thicker wire into your entire chassis. It couldn't run. So this is why we're making this modification. So, as it always has been with every single one of these wires, I have my electrical tape on my black wire. So since my red wire is exposed, I'm going to be cutting off the sheathing and I'm going to be doing some soldering. Which means I'm going to be taking my red wire first, which is the positive if you remember the color coding. These wires always, you should always get batteries with JST connectors for safety reasons. Anyway, so let's do this. Let's zoom in just a little bit so we can have an idea of what we're doing. So turn our soldering iron on. Make sure that we're safe. We have our spool and we're ready. So just about here. And for the bigger wire, I'm going to be going for the bigger connectors. So I guess that this might be 20 gauge wire because it really, this is really thick. This wire is huge. You can't see the differences between the one and the other wire, how big they are, which gives us an advantage. We can intertwine them. We can just, you know, put the one in the other, but that really is not going to matter. So, as it always has, your helping hands with your alligator clip, toothless. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be pre-tinning our wire. Get that hand away. And on the date of recording this, it's June 1st, so I want to congratulate my Russian friends for eliminating Spain from the World Cup. That's a thing. And just a little zoom in. You guys get the idea, you're smart. Take my wire strip, snips away. And basically pre-tin the tip. Nice and easy. Apply the same principle to the battery sheathing. I'm going to let this off. Even in thicker wire, you do not want to run the risk of, you know, just screwing the whole thing up. So okay, to me that is pre-tin, it's okay. So I'm going to take my second alligator clip and we're going to be connecting the first two joints between the battery and the wire. And since the wire not connected to anything, we don't have to worry about passing the heat shrink through first. So yeah, I think that the wire that I've exposed is a little too long, so I'm going to just snip just a bit off. And these pliers I have are a little crappy. I thought they were sharp, but they're not so sharp. Just to be nice and aligned. Come on, do me a favor. Okay. If you can see that. The electrical tape in the way, but you see where the joint is. So, pretending my iron. There, that worked rather well for me, and as it always has, test the joint, nice and sturdy, and I'm happy with that. So I take it again and I see where the heat shrink connection is going to be, and it's staggered, so my the plan I had in my head looks like it's going to pan out, so I'm going to see what size heat shrink I should apply for this. And what's the smallest I have? I'm going to be going with this one. It's the next best thing I have. Take a sip. Some wonderful lemonade. Homemade lemonade, that is. And this fits just fine. So I don't want it to be too long. Like that, you just sit and calculate what's going to. And so we're right about at where 600 is written. So I want to be the very best. Okay, and there we go. We cut just a bit and feed this to see if we're happy with the size. We have a very good supply of heat shrink, so it doesn't really matter to me how much I use. Okay, so I'm gonna use my alligator clip there to hold that steady, and we're gonna shrink this together. Oops. That's why it's supposed to start from the bottom, I guess. This could be a little too snug, too thick. But the smaller heat shrink wouldn't fit. I fear that it would be too small. Just wondering with the next biggest size I have right now at my disposal. It's the negative thing with heat shrink, and you're trying to shrink it with your iron. Always clean the tip, always keep it nice and clean. did what I could. And that is why not staggering them is a great idea. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking some electrical tape, with the same electrical tape, and I'm going to be applying it onto the red wire for safety. That way my red wire is nice and secure. And we can do the same with our black wire, and I'll be back in a minute. Hey everyone, we're back, and I went and soldered my thinner wires and staggered them as I previously mentioned. So we're practically done now with the battery. So what I want to do is I want to cut off a second piece of electrical tape. Just for safety reasons, and put that onto my negative black wire. So we're coming pretty close to the home stretch regarding the Graflex, and with our battery now soldered with its wires and well practically modified a little bit, we can go on to our speaker, which I have here. And with our speaker, we're going to be needing some E6000 and a toothpick, and we're going to be needing our LED module for that, because we're going to be putting everything into the 3D printed chassis. But before we go, even with the E6000 and our toothpick, we're going to have to solder our battery together. So I'm going to take it out, and in here I have the speaker with its wires. This is the 28 millimeter premium speaker. It's small, it's got a very slim profile, and the way it's going to fit back in the chassis, it's going to fit all of the wires at this section, so that's why it's preferred to use this one. It's especially for a beginner like myself, it is really recommended. So I'm going to be getting my modified hobby vise real quick. And we can mount and bring our camera a little closer. There we go. What I'm essentially going to do is mount the speaker onto the vise, and we're going to be soldering our speaker as well. So what's left is our recharge port and our soundboard, and essentially the build is coming along really nice. So these speakers have an advantage: they come pre-tinned, so we don't have to do the pre-tinning ourselves. So I'm going to tighten that just a little bit, and I will have to raise my helping hands, but that is not really a problem. So the green wire, according to our color coding, is for the speakers. I don't know if you have been keeping track, but green is for the speakers. But before we do that, we have to pre-tin the wire. Let's do that. Okay, kind of like that. Put this, and we want our sheathing right at the back. I'm going to snip off just a bit of the tin because I'm not really happy. It sticks out a little too much, so we can go back like that. It sits wonderfully, and what we can do is we can just continue And there we go. Actually, I have to say this is the best joint I have done so far in this build. And I'm gonna try to pull it. Whew, that's great. The speaker doesn't really care about positives or negatives. As long as there's electricity flowing through the speaker, it will work. That is why we have two green wires. And on the soundboard we have a positive and a negative. So for the battery, and if you go with either one, it doesn't really matter. It's not marked on the speaker where the positive or the negative is. It really doesn't matter, so you can't really mess this up. It's basically the easiest thing to do. So if you feel that you've got some problem with your solder, I found out that it could be because your solder is of very poor quality, and the ones that I got off eBay are not the best quality wise. There have been better. I do believe that there have been better, so let me just take that aside and let us pre-tin this wire real quick so that you guys can also see what I'm doing and that I can also see what I'm doing. And it's okay. It's a little difficult with the helping hands elevated like that, but we can still manage. Just let me just curve this a little bit so that I can sit on the speaker a little better, because you want the whole wire. You don't want it in the air. You don't want it, you know, almost. You just want it to be exact. And sometimes wires don't cooperate all that well. The sheathing should be butted up against the connection. And let us do this once more. Oops. Not enough solder. Ooh, that thing just moved. I'll just do this off screen real quick. I kind of panicked there, but okay. So, both of these wires are beautifully soldered, and we're done with the speaker. So, speaker is nice and soldered, and the battery is nice and modded. And we're gonna have to, you know, twist these wires together, but that's not an issue. This can go aside. I don't need that. I'm turning off my soldering iron right now because I really don't need it. And I can throw this away if your speaker came in this and not another, you know, box, a little white box. You can throw it away. You don't need that right now. So these two are done. And we can move on to inserting our, or installing everything into our chassis really. I guess there's not much to do right now than to install our chassis. And that's the exciting part, because the lightsaber is coming together really, really nicely. So I'll gather all my materials in a jiffy and we'll be back. Hey everyone. So we're back on the workspace, and what do we see? We see a big mess of things. We're coming close to the final stretch of the build. We have our 3D print chassis that's all painted with the crystal chamber all installed with the LED and the crystal. We have our activation switch all wired up and ready to go on our clamp switch holder. We modified our battery. Oops. we modify our battery to take the smaller wires, which we have put some electrical tape to the end for safety reasons, because we do not want to trip the PCB board protection. And we also have our LED with its resistors and its 3 wires that will go to the board. And last but not least, we soldered our speaker. So what's left is the recharge port, which we will be doing a little later, and the soundboard when we've got everything done. So what you want to know now, we reached to this point, what do we do? Before we drop the speaker in, since all of our wires are going to be held in this section, we want everything from the LED to the battery to the activation switch holder to be placed in our chassis, so that we can put our speaker that's going to hold all the wires at the back. So the speaker is going to go last on the this part of the chassis, and at the back end of the chassis we're going to be doing our recharge port and our soundboard. So this is how the order of things are going to go. Also, you're going to be needing some twist ties. I'll demonstrate that in a bit. We're just gonna hold our wires and kind of twist this so that we don't need to hold things with our hands. It's great for freeing our hands generally when we're doing some work. So what is going to go first in this build? Let us just zoom in a little bit. There we go. So we're going to take our back end of the chassis aside for now and put our components back away. And we are going to be installing our LED module. And we're going to be taking all of these wires inside, and we're going to be feeding them one by one through the battery section. Now inside, if the lighting is good, which it is, in this channel inside, this is where the wire is going to ride. So if you look at your Graflex chassis, something that you cannot see right now, but in the battery section you can see this little step underneath where my screwdriver is showing you. This step inside the circle where I'm underlining right now is a wire channel, and believe it or not, it is spacious enough for our wires to travel inside, and it will look cramped and you'll think, how the hell is all this going to fit? But if you're patient enough, we're going to be passing and feeding our wires one by one inside our chassis. So this might take a while, so I'll be back when I've fed the entire LED module through the chassis. And I'm halfway there. I'm going to show you how the red wire is going to go through. So just like every other wire, I have the battery section facing down where this big groove is exposed, this big hole. So I'm going to feed my red wire to my hands in the crystal chamber section, and making sure that I don't lose the wire, I just feed them through with my fingers. If you feel that your fingers are not going to do that good a job, you can use some pliers, but pull them very gently. You don't want to risk harming your wires. And once you're sure that all of your wires are at the back end, oops, you see, that's what I mean. You don't want to drag your wires around. You might hurt one of your wires and stuff. So I think I lost it with my red wire a bit. No, there we go. It's rather easy. It's one of the longest wires traveling in this chassis. So I'm pulling it out of the back end and holding all 3 wires, the white flash on clash, the 2 negative blues. My resistor section is going to be fed in, and it fits just tight enough. Pull your wires very, very carefully, and do not, if you see that they're going to twist and bunch up and risk being pulled, and you risk straining your wires, just stop what you're doing and see where they get stuck. So like that, you pull nice and gently, and we have successfully fed our wires for the LED module through the chassis. Now our resistors are supposed to be at this section, so when the this channel for the back end of the chassis, the crystal chamber chassis, this is where our resistors are going to be sitting, and from the looks of things, that's how it's going to work out. So I'm going to keep my LED module like this, and if you want to, you can hold your back end of the chassis like this. Let me just zoom out a little bit. So I'm going to hold my wires, they're all coming out like this, and that's the first part. Next, what we're going to be installing is our battery. Now, how do you align your battery? The top section of your wires are going to be held up like this, and since I have this Teflon tape, I already know in which section of the chassis it's going to go. So using your one hand to hold your wires like that, you hold them back, or you can hold them with your finger in the middle here and hold the wires to make sure that the battery is nice and aligned. I want you guys to see this. Hold the whole thing steadily. And don't worry, just pull your wires and hold them against the let me just make sure that this is all nice and aligned, and very gently slide it into place. And the good thing is that when you tighten your retention screw, like I am at least, your battery is going to be pressured, so you don't need any glue in the chassis or anything. So we have installed our battery inside our chassis. So bunching up the wires like this and making some calculations how this is going to go. So you want to take your wires and you want to gently just give it a nice tug so that everything can tighten down. And as you can see at the top section here, this is where our LED wires ride all the way into the chassis and coming out the back end. So what is left is we want to pass our activation switch wires, which is going to be a lot easier this time. So we are going to take our wires like this, and we're going to make a little hook. Since the battery is already installed, it is best that you do the activation switch wires after you install your battery, just like that. Want them to go one by one, that's okay too. But this is going to be a tight fit. Quite a tight fit, I might say. So I'm going to go one wire at a time. And one of my wires has made it through, so I'm going to be using my toothless curved pliers to fish the wire out. And there we go. That's one wire. And now for the second one. I don't know if you can see what I'm doing. Let me just zoom in a little for you guys. But essentially this is the window. And you just want to play around, see where the battery isn't that snug. So that the illumination is supposed to help us. So this may take a while, but you're not in a hurry. You want to do this perfectly. And I'll be back in a minute after I have successfully, or no, actually, I have both of my wires, which I'm going to be catching with my toothless pliers. And that way, I'm pulling both of my purple and black wires with my pliers, and I'm going to take all of this wire away. And oops, it's at the other side of the chassis. So we want them to come out this way and pull. Now this may be a little too snug at first, and I feel that it's untwisting my my whole wire thing that I've got on going on with my activation switch. So you don't want to put too much stress. Yeah, this thing is coming apart. But still, our activation switch wires are looking good. If you want, you can twist this and heat it so that it looks okay. So I'm gonna go and do that real quick, and I'll be back with you in just a second. And we're back. I just heated the twisted section of the wires. If you want to pull back, it's okay. So I want it to be about this much because that's how much I estimate that the clamp is going to take over. So if I feel that it's too much, I just tug some wire in. If it's too little, then I tug some wire out. So that's not a problem. And I'm going to take these two wires, and it looks like a mess, so don't get desperate. I'm actually excited to see that all these wires are coming out of my chassis. We've been busy, very busy in these past few days. So make some space, some room for your wires to come out the other side. And just be a little... I need to see what I'm doing. So, okay. And all of my wires are now traveling into the on the chassis. So pulling everything into play, and I can see my color coding. But there's something missing, and that is my green wire, which means my speaker is missing. So for us to be able to wire our speaker, what we're going to do is we're going to zoom out a little bit so that you guys can see an expanded picture. I think it works best this way. The only negative thing about this clamp switch holder is that by the time you assemble all this, this is basically going to be dragging around with the rest of the chassis. So remember those twist ties I told you about earlier? So we're going to be using one. And I'm going to take one of them that I have right now in my hands, and I'm going to feed it up the wire section, make sure that nothing just pops out, and make sure that all of the wires inside your channel in here are lined up real nice, nothing rides on something else, nothing's pinched, and that everything is nice and stretched. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold my wires with this one hand, and I'm going to take one of my twist ties and tie my wires down, and the twist tie will add some pressure to this. This is only temporary so that I can work with my wires. There. So my twist tie is going to help hold my wires down while I have my hands free to do some work with a battery. Now I'm going to push these down a little bit. You want your wires to be pushed inside this section in here. I don't know if the camera can show it to you. So let me zoom in, get some better lighting, or not. But in this dark little section in here is where our speaker is supposed to sit. So I think that you can see the wires over here, where I'm pointing at with my screwdriver, right here. So you want those wires to be a little pressed so that they can take the shape of the speaker when your speaker sits down. And you want to make sure that they ride in that little groove that we showed where the battery holder section sits and rests. And so you're going to have to see what you're doing, making sure that all of the wires are sitting properly. And for me it looks okay. And right now I'm going to put this aside for now, be very careful, and we have our speaker in hand. So what we're going to be doing with our speaker is we're going to be taking some E6000 and we're gonna dab some of it. I'm gonna put this down here, and you remember the trick with the toothpick, I believe. And I have to use this a little fast because I've got a fan blowing on me. It's very hot. It's summer, so you want to apply your E6000 glue to the metallic rim, the outer metallic rim of the lower part of the speaker. The crystal chamber will apply some decent pressure to your speaker when the whole thing is held in place, but the extra glue is never a bad idea. So it's better to be safe than sorry. Take a bit more of this glue. And when we're done dabbing our glue, not too much, not too little, just enough. Oh, come on, don't be shy. My glue is camera shy. So you want to be a little quick because the glue tends to dry. Be sure not to press the center of the speaker because, like I mentioned in previous videos, it will get ruined. So if you're a Marvel fan, let us do what Pepper Potts did in reverse to Tony Stark when she took the magnet out of his chest in Iron Man 1. Kind of feels like that. So we're going to put this into the speaker, into the chassis. Nice and slow. And this is where the twist tie helps. So you want the wire section of your speaker to sit with the rest of your wires. Now this is where you're going to take your twist tie out. Real carefully. Come on. Stupid thing. And using your screwdriver and very, very carefully, the fact that it's balancing onto one tiny LED module is not very helpful, but there, it's supposed to ride in the middle, and like that, I'm going to take my speaker, as you can see, and I'm going to use my screwdriver very slowly on my fingers, which is recommended, and I'm going to push that into the groove. I'm not happy with it, so I'm going to make it pop out again. Make sure it sits on the upper lip. You don't want it to sit too low. And I'm going to demonstrate what I did in just a minute. This can be tiresome. But once you're sure that it sits in the speaker holder, if you will, there's a lip in this chassis that sits into, oops, and that is firmly in place. I don't know if you can see it, but my speaker has been successfully installed. And good idea that I saw from East Coast Sabres, which basically my whole series is derivative. I'm going to get that out in the open. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be able to do this, or at least not this way. And I found out that his way, for me at least, works very well, so that's why I decided to make a video series based on his knowledge. It's kind of like a mini disclaimer. I got too much glue here. So we're installing our speaker. Let us remember why we're doing this. We're installing our speaker so we can get everything into the chassis, or the, well, at least top half of the chassis. And you want to put some glue, just a little bit, just a dab, to be safe. That clicking sound is really not good news. You don't want to mess with it. Be very gentle. Oops, you see, this is why the LED module is a handful. So let me just take my wires and take them at the back again, like that. Hold it with one hand down, and with the other we take our toothpick again, and we take some glue and we dab it inside our chassis. So I think that concerning our speaker, we are okay. So this is coming along together beautifully. I am very, very happy with what's going on. So another thing that you want to do, and I'm going to zoom in for that, is you can see that we have some wire in here. And it looks like a giant mess, but it really isn't. So what you want to do is you want to just take a minute to just separate your wires and make sure that nothing rides onto something else. And like that. Let us go over the wires. These 3 wires are my 3 wires for the LED, which I'm going to align here at this section. These 2, this purple one, I can't see where the black wire for that is, but I think it's somewhere in here. There it is. The purple and black wire that I put together now is the are the wires for the activation switch. Black is negative, purple is positive. My 3 positives for the LED, the 2 greens for the speakers, the thick black and red wires are the ones that are from the battery, and the white flash on clash with my blue wire. So that's that. I'm very satisfied with how this is going so far. So what we can do, since we're so close to assembly, is we can take our modified core, inner core, and we can set the whole thing together. We can set this whole thing up. So since we're going with the Empire Strikes Back, I'm pretty sure that you must have forgotten what Graflex looks like now. I still have it in my box. I haven't taken it out yet. So I told you that I'm not going to be going with a retention screw. So it's because I wanted to try out to see if the blade retention screw is going to help with the LED module not playing around. We don't want it to go up and down like this. We want it to be steady. So if I go for my Empire Strikes Back bag, or actually I'm going to go with my New Hope bag, and take out your glass eye, your replica of a glass eye that is, because the glass eyes are actually made of glass. This is steel. So I'm going to get my blade plug over here, and basically I think it's time to tape this down to make it look a little more presentable. I'll be back in a sec. And we're back. We taped around the inner core where we put our plastic to help anchor the inner core where we wanted to align with the rest of the Graflex. So I'm going to be zooming out actually. There we go. So we're going to take this in and feed it, and it goes very nicely with this incision section looking at the window for our chassis. And I know that this is aligned because this is how it works. And if you take your 5/64 Allen wrench, I said my Allen wrenches are in American Standard, and we go to the retention screw that I mentioned in one of my modifications that I made. You tighten down the rubber section to the battery. It's going to tighten down, hopefully it won't go through. and it's nice and tight, nice and firm. And our inner core is now wired. Well, actually no, it's actually been threaded to our chassis. That is going to hold together beautifully. So this is the basic installation, component installation of our Graflex to here. And what I want to try right now is I want to put my kill key, or no, my blade plug inside, and I want to use a retention screw to see if this is going to work. So my blade plug, I'm going to hold it down as strong as possible. Hold it down like this and you thread your retention screw nice and tight. And as you can see, I'm shaking this, and the LED is locked into place. It's not going to be shifting from side to side. So the retention screw idea that I had is enough. It's going to work, so I'm happy with that. And I'm going to leave this just like this for now. It's a temporary situation. So we're going to go and solder our recharge port, and this is going to be one of the most trickiest parts because you need to pay extra attention to it. The recharge port has 3 prongs, and it's going to take 2 negatives and 2 positives accordingly, and you need to pay close attention. I really need to revise the recharge port myself, and until then I'll be back in just a few so that we can do our recharge port, and I'll see you guys in a sec.